neurological, there's a listing as far as a GC3, is that correct?
Yes.
And can you explain what that is and what that means?
So GC is what I charted. What I intended to write there was GCS, which is a Glasgow Coma scale, which is a scoring system to identify someone's level of consciousness or unresponsiveness.
And as far as the three, what is like? Where does the scale start? Where does it go to? And where does the three fit in?
So there's three components: verbal function, motor function, and eye or ocular function. And someone who's completely unresponsive, as in no motor, no verbal, and no eye movement or function, completely unresponsive. The lowest you can get on the scale is 3.
Thank you, sir. May I approach this retreat?
Yes.
Now, later on over the course of that same morning, did you have occasion to become involved in the treatment of another patient by the name of Karen Reed?
Yes.
And may I approach the witness again, Your Honor?
Yes.
So I'm showing you another document, just ask you to look at that to the extent you can recognize it and look up whenever you finish. In general, sir, do you recognize what that is?
Yes.
Or what do you recognize it?
The first part I recognized would have been the medical record or medical note with respect to Miss Reed, who was also a patient that morning.
Thank you. Your Honor, the Commonwealth seeks to introduce in a minute the next exhibit, a redacted copy of those records.
Regarding no objections, subjects to the redactions.
Okay. Thank you. This is exhibit 106. Thank you.
Now, sir, if you know, about what time was it that Miss Reed came into the emergency department at Good Samaritan that morning?
I mean, I can tell you from this chart, it looks like that at least the first posted vital signs were from 7:51 in the morning.
And in reference to Miss Reed, what is it that she came into Good Samaritan in regard to? Why was she there?
I'd have to review Daisy's note. So
Well, let me ask you this, sir. Was it in reference to Section 12? Do you recall?
yes.
And with regard to Section 12, patients that come in regard to that, what kind of involvement do you have, or who, if anyone, do you work with in regard to those types of patients?
Sure. So Section 12, I would define as an involuntary detention of a person, usually for a mental health concern, whether that's self-harm or harm to others, or if someone who's afflicted with schizophrenia or psychosis, members of the public can bring someone to or the police or members of the public can bring someone to the hospital on a Section 12, which, again, involuntarily detains them for evaluation.
And in addition to yourself, is there other staff? You mentioned that there were physician's assistants or nurses that were working. How much involvement would you typically have with someone who comes in on that kind of prognosis or diagnosis?
I would say, to answer your question, my involvement is variable and dependent a lot of times on what that nurse practitioner or physician assistant feels like they need or want my involvement to be.
And what kind of involvement would you have as far as when someone comes in with that kind of issue? What is sort of the typical protocol or policies that Good Samaritan would undergo with reference to that patient? What are you doing with reference to the patient when they arrive?
I'm sorry, I think I don't really understand what the question is.
No, understood. Let me rephrase that. So with regard to a patient coming in on a Section 12, what happens with that person once they present in the ER?
So whether they're evaluated by me or a nurse practitioner or physician assistant, if that person feels like, based on their evaluation, that they need a mental health consult or evaluation, then they would have that initiated, as well as what we do for a lot of patients or all patients, vital signs, and sometimes blood work as well.
And when it comes to that sort of blood work or assay, as far as what's being done with someone who comes in with that kind of report, what is sort of being tested and what is being looked at as far as the blood work is concerned?
Well, there's a few reasons to get blood work, but in general, part of the evaluation is, with respect to the medical presentation, to make sure there's no medical emergencies present, in addition to whatever the mental health concern may be. There's also blood work drawn with respect to disposition, as far as some people, for example, it would be inappropriate to have a mental health evaluation if, for example, I were intoxicated on alcohol and my alcohol level were elevated, because I think the idea is that you're not getting, a true representation maybe of what's going on.
So am I correct in that someone presents and then there's you medically clear that person as far as any sort of injuries or anything like that first?
I wouldn't say first necessarily. I think a lot of times these processes happen in parallel.
So in parallel, you have the medical clearance and then sort of psychological clearance as well?
Sometimes, yes.
And then sort of involved in both of those, there would be blood drawn and reference to a Section 12 as far as a typical one would be looking for sort of alcohol and drugs of abuse, things of that nature.
I mean, I'm hesitant to answer yes because of the word typical, because I wouldn't say there's really a typical presentation with respect to mental health presentations in the ER.
And from your memory and or your review of the chart, was that done as far as the blood work done with regard to Ms. Reed on this day?
You're asking me if blood work was drawn?
Yes.
I believe so. I have to double check. So yes, it looks like there was blood work drawn.
And among the things that were tested within the facility within Good Samaritan was the alcohol screen. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what is the result of that alcohol screen as contained within those records?
I'm going on.
Do I answer or no?
Yes.
So it looks like 93.93. I'd have to maybe look deeper in the chart to tell you the units of that measurement. I don't want to guess. So, but to answer your question, 93.
Can I approach this briefly on?
Yes.
I just. direct your attention to it's the top portion of that.
Sure.
Do you see the units that 93 pertains to contained in that record, sir?
So yes, it looks like it's milligrams per deciliter.
Thank you, sir. May I approach this to retrieve, Your Honor?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions of this witness, Your Honor.
Right, Ms. Little?
Good afternoon.
Hi.
You testified that you treated Ms. Reed when she arrived at the hospital on January 29th, correct?
I don't know if I testified that I treated her, but I was involved in her care. Yes,
You actually wrote the reports regarding her care, correct?
that is not correct.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at the report?
The report, I believe we're talking about the note, the emergency room note was written by a nurse practitioner.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at some additional reports from January 29th?
Sounds like you want to show me some reports, so sure.
Thank you. May I approach?
Yes.
Yep, okay.
Is your recollection refreshed? Do you recall treating Ms. Reed on January 29th?
I do not.
Do you recall writing a report that has your name, Justin Rice, on it from January 29th?
No, it depends what you define report as. To best answer your, well, do I recall writing this note? No. Was that what your question was?
So is it your testimony that do you recall treating Ms. Reed at all?
No, I don't.
Do you recall actually ordering her blood in this case?
No,
Do you recall sending it out to the labs at all?
no,
As you sit here today, you don't know who collected the blood?
that's correct.
You don't know who packaged the blood?
That would also be a fair assessment, yes?
And you don't know who submitted that to the lab?
Correct.
And it wasn't you, correct?
I can confidently say that I did not collect blood work. Yeah, I did not do that.
Okay. You testified that you treated Mr. O'Keefe upon arrival on January 29th, correct?
Yes,
Did a firefighter ever approach you on the morning of January 29th and tell you that he had information suggesting that the victim had been struck by a vehicle?
Objection.
Do you remember that?
I do not.
So if a firefighter indicated that he informed you that he had information suggesting that Mr. O'Keefe had been in some sort of vehicular accident, that's something that you would have included in your report, correct?
I don't know if that's a fair assumption.
But as you sit here today, you have no recollection whatsoever, of anyone telling you that the victim had appeared to be in some sort of car accident, correct?
Well, I think, I don't have it in front of me, but I think my note that I prepared for Mr. O'Keefe states that per EMS for
Sorry, what was that?
Dr. Rice, you have no record.
So I don't think he finished his answer.
So I think that what I was trying to say, right, was that on my note, it says per EMS report. So one of the medics, as in one of the folks on the ambulance who brought Mr. O'Keefe in, again, I'm not right in front of my note, but as I recall, it said something to the effect of per EMS report, the patient may have been struck by a vehicle.
Well, can I show you a copy of that report?
Please.
Mayor Fritsch?
Yes.
You could take a look at that.
All right. So
I'll ask the question. Is your recollection
course.
refreshed?
yes,
Is there anywhere on that report that says that the patient came in and there was a statement by EMS that the victim appeared to have been struck by a vehicle?
just give me a moment to read through the.
Sure.
So no, there is not.
In fact, there's no mention of a vehicle whatsoever, correct?
That's correct.
Dr. Rice, did you observe Mr. O'Keefe's injuries when he arrived at the hospital that morning?
I guess you'd have to define what observe injuries means.
Well, during the course of your treatment, did you inspect him for injuries?
So, yes,
You testified that you observed certain abrasions and scratches on his right arm, correct?
yes,
Aside from his injuries to his right arm, and I believe you described sort of laceration above his eye,
hmm
John O'Keefe did not have a single other injury on his body from the neck down, correct?
I don't know if that's fair to say.
Well, you didn't report a single injury to his shoulders, correct?
Correct,
You did not report a single injury to his chest, correct?
correct,
You did not report a single injury to his torso, correct?
correct,
You did not report a single injury to his back, correct?
correct,
You also did not report a single injury to his ribs, correct?
correct,
No injury to his hips, right?
correct,
You observed no injury to his knees, correct?
I reported no injuries to his knees, correct,
No injuries to his shins, correct?
correct,
No injuries to his ankles, right?
correct,
And no injuries to his feet.
correct.
From the neck down, he did not have a single broken bone, right?
I don't know if that's a fair assessment or statement.
You certainly didn't notate in your report that he had any broken bones from the neck down, correct?
No, I did not. I'd happy to explain that, but to answer your question, no, I did not.
You did not report a single fracture from the neck down, correct?
I did not report a single fracture, correct.
The injuries that you testified to today were that he had sort of a laceration above his eyelid, correct?
The injuries that I testified to today, correct, yes.
And the scratches on his right arm.
On the right forearm, yes.
No further questions.
Okay, Mr. Lally?
Dr. Rice, with reference to fractures or broken bones, can you explain sort of why that may not have been noted or why that wasn't included within the chart?
Sure, yeah, I'd like to. So with a patient like Mr. O'Keefe who came in, the focus of myself and the team of physician assistant, nurse practitioner, and nurses, whoever was helping in a case like this, the focus is in core resuscitative medicine, of securing an airway, making sure he has a breathing tube in, making sure that the CPR is being applied the right pressure to the right place, making sure that the core resuscitative elements of medicine are happening, unless as in the mind can only focus on so much. So I think in cases like this, because the attention is on resuscitation of someone's heartbeat, their life, there's less focus on injuries or observations that don't coincide with the resuscitation effort, or not pertinent to that resuscitative effort. If that if that answers your question.
So in that vein, it's not like you're doing x-rays or a full skeletal survey or something like that.
No, we're not doing a full skeletal survey. No.
Because you're more concerned with the fact that his body core temperature is 80, his heart isn't pumping blood, and he's pulseless, correct?
Correct, unless there was an extremity injury that would be pertinent to his resuscitation. If he had had a traumatic amputation, as in removal of a leg, for example, that would be pertinent to a resuscitation. But an otherwise intact extremity, that is not necessarily within the realm of resuscitation.
Now, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
I'm going to direct your attention on the document. Indicates discharge and clinical impression. If you could just read from that, look up when you're finished. Read to yourself.
I'm sorry, what would you like me to read out loud?
So as far as the chart is concerned, as far as your clinical impression of Mr. O'Keefe, can you read sort of what you...
Sure, right. So I wrote clinical impression, cardiac arrest, head trauma, exposure to environmental cold.
May I approach this to retrieve him?
Yes.
No further questions.
Anything further, Ms. Little?
No further questions.
All right, thank you, doctor. You are all set.
Thanks.
Rather than where it's 10 minutes of one, jurors, can we do an abbreviated lunch today so we can get as much of the testimony in as possible? So it's 10 minutes of one. Why don't we come back here at 1:30? And can we go until 4:30 today? People seem to say yes. If that changes, just let Officer Delano or Officer Lyden know. Okay, thank you. So we'll see you back here at 1:30.
All right, so the court, please.
You are muted.
Okay.
No, I can.
Thank you. Maybe see.
All right, so as far as the redactions that you think should be there, Ms. Little, and you perhaps don't, Mr. Lally, I don't know if the testimony opened the door any on some of what may or may not have been there. I don't have it in front of me. I haven't seen it. So the two of you talk, and if you're not in agreement, I would like a copy of both by 1:15 so that I can decide it before it goes in, and then it will be the next exhibit, either with or without the additional redactions. Okay?
Okay.
All right, thank you.
All rise. Let's stand for the Lord's Prayer.